There's one mistake that destroys your power before it even has the chance to grow. One mistake that makes people dismiss you, overlook you, and treat you like you don't matter. And here's the truth. It has nothing to do with your intelligence, your skills, or even your potential. The mistake is this: looking poor. Now, I'm not talking about the money in your bank account. I'm not talking about the numbers sitting in your wallet. I'm talking about appearance, perception, the silent signals you send every single time you enter a room. If Niccolo Machiavelli were to explain power, he would tell you that power lives in perception. Because the world rarely sees who you truly are. It sees what you project if you look poor, if you carry yourself like someone with nothing. People will assume you are nothing. And once that assumption is made, the game is already tilted against you. Think about history in royal courts. What you wore often decided whether you were respected or ignored. Clothing, posture, symbols of status. These things often mattered more than truth itself. And honestly, modern life works the exact same way. The symbols have changed, but the psychology hasn't. Today, it might be your grooming, your clothes, your posture, your tone, the way you move. People read all of it in seconds. Before you speak, before you explain yourself, before they know your story. That's the part most people fail to understand. They believe respect comes later. They think once people see how hard I work, they'll understand my worth. But the world doesn't wait that long. People judge fast, sometimes in less than a few seconds. They don't ask what you've been through. They don't pause to discover your hidden talent. They simply decide, important or unimportant, strong or weak, valuable or forgettable. And once that first impression settles in, it becomes incredibly difficult to change. That's why so many capable people remain invisible. Not because they lack talent, but because they look like they don't value themselves. And if you don't seem to value yourself, why should anyone else? Most people react to this invisibility in the worst possible way. They start over-explaining. They talk too much. They try to convince others of their worth. They tell their whole life story, hoping someone will finally see them. But here's the harsh truth. The more desperately you explain yourself, the more desperate you appear. And desperation is one of the fastest signals of weakness. The principle is simple. Never look poor, even if you are not. Because you need to lie. Not because you need to fake luxury. But because you must. Never hand the world a reason to label you as weak. Because once people place you in that category, they stop taking you seriously. This is basic human psychology. People instinctively move toward strength. And they instinctively distance themselves from weakness. When someone looks composed, intentional, and in control, people lean in. When someone looks chaotic, neglected, or desperate, people pull away. It happens in dating. It happens in business. It happens in everyday social life. Imagine going into an important meeting, looking exhausted, sloppy, and unprepared. Even if you are the smartest person in that room, most people will never give you the chance to prove it. Because perception speaks before intelligence does. The same is true in relationships. If you show up looking like you don't care about yourself, the message is clear: I don't value myself. And people subconsciously respond to that message. This is why appearance is not vanity. It's strategy. Machiavelli understood something. Most people still ignore. People respond to symbols faster than they respond to truth. Powerful people understand presence. They don't beg for respect. They create it, sometimes without saying a single word. That starts with the way you present yourself. And no, this does not mean expensive brands. This is where people misunderstand the principle. They think power means designer clothes, luxury watches, and flashy displays. That's not power. That's often insecurity. Wearing a costume. Real power is subtle. It's clean. It's sharp. It's intentional. A simple outfit that fits well and looks disciplined will command more respect than an expensive one that looks careless. The same applies to body language. Stand tall. Move slowly. Don't rush. Stillness signals control. And control signals power. People who are weak tend to fidget. They adjust constantly. They look around nervously. They rush their words. They overtalk. They try to fill every silence. But powerful people are comfortable with silence. They don't chase attention. Attention comes to them. That's the difference. Even your voice matters. Weakness often sounds rushed. Loud and unstable power sounds calm. Measured, controlled, sometimes almost quiet. The strange thing is, people often trust the quieter voice more. Because calmness suggests confidence. And confidence suggests capability. This principle has existed throughout history. Kings understood it. Generals understood it. Leaders mastered it. Many rulers were not as wealthy as the public believed. But they always looked powerful. Crowns, robes, architecture, ceremony, all symbols. Sometimes illusion, but illusion itself can become power. That's the deeper lesson. People don't always respond to reality. They respond to what reality appears to be. This is why the illusion of strength can create real-world influence. When people believe you have power, they treat you accordingly. And that treatment opens doors. More respect, more opportunities, more trust, better treatment in every environment. Even strangers respond differently. The waiter treats you better. People listen more closely. Enemies hesitate. Potential allies become curious. All because of one thing: your presence tells a story. So ask yourself, what story does your presence tell? Does it say control? Does it say discipline? Does it say calm strength? Or does it say uncertainty? Neglect, desperation, because whether you realize it or not, people are constantly reading that story. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Once you master presence, the next level is mystery. Don't always stay too long. Don't always make yourself available. Appear sharp, composed, and then leave. Let people wonder. Who was that? That question alone increases your perceived value. Scarcity creates intrigue. Mystery creates status. People value what they cannot easily access. That's why presence plus absence becomes a powerful combination. You arrive with control. You leave before familiarity reduces your impact. And suddenly your image grows larger in their mind. That is strategic perception. This is the first layer of power. Not money, not status, not titles. Perception, because perception often creates access to everything else. So remember this. The world rarely rewards struggle. It rewards the image of strength. As Niccolò Machiavelli would say, people believe what they see, long before they understand what is true. And once they believe you are powerful, the world begins to respond differently. That response can change your entire life. The world is not fair. Let's be honest about that. Most people will never meet the real you. They will only meet the version of you that your presence introduces. The mask, the image, the signal, and if that signal communicates weakness, insecurity, or poverty of spirit, that is the identity they will assign to you. This is why great strategists throughout history understood one brutal truth. Power is theater. The stage is every room you enter. The audience is every person who looks at you. And whether you like it or not, they are already judging the performance. Before you say a word, before they know your intelligence, before they understand your ambition, they are deciding who you are based on what you project. Think about leaders in history. Julius Caesar did not rise only because of military brilliance. He understood image. He understood symbolism. Even before absolute power, he carried himself like someone destined for it. His presence announced authority, long before authority was officially his. People admire confidence. They are drawn to certainty, even when certainty is partly illusion. That is the psychology most people miss. Looking poor is not simply about clothing. It is about appearing out of control. Because control is the true currency of respect. The moment people feel you lack control over yourself, they assume you lack control over your life. And once they make that assumption, they stop following. They stop trusting. They stop investing attention in you. This is why presence matters more than people think. A man in clean fitted clothes, moving with composure, speaks differently to the room than a man who looks careless and restless, not because of money, because of discipline. Discipline itself looks expensive. Control itself looks powerful. And people instinctively respect what looks controlled. That's why the real lesson is not pretend to be rich. The real lesson is never look neglected. Neglect is what people read as poverty. Wrinkled clothes, poor posture, nervous energy, constant talking. Seeking validation, all of these communicate low status. But calmness communicates the opposite. Picture someone walking into a room slowly. No rush, no nervous movements. Steady eye contact. Straight posture. Measured words. Even in simple clothing. That person immediately feels more powerful. Because people assume there is something beneath that. Calmness. Resources. Influence. Discipline. Possibility. Sometimes even danger. That assumption itself creates power. This is why powerful people rarely explain themselves. Weak people over-explain. They try to convince others. They argue for their own worth. But true presence doesn't beg for validation. It lets people arrive at the conclusion themselves. And usually people imagine more than reality. That works in your favor if you speak less. People fill the silence. If you reveal less, people create their own theories. And most of the time, their imagination elevates you beyond what you explicitly show. That's why mystery multiplies status. Machiavellian thinking is built on this principle. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that what people believe about you often matters more than what is objectively true. This applies everywhere in business, in dating, in social circles. A sloppy appearance makes people question your capability. A controlled appearance makes people assume competence. And assumptions shape opportunity. That job offer, that partnership, that connection, that invitation many times. These things are decided before logic enters the room. People like to believe they make rational choices. But first impressions are emotional. Humans rank status automatically. It's instinctive, the way you dress, the way you move, the way you handle silence, the way you respond under pressure. All of it becomes part of an invisible calculation. And once you are placed into a lower status category, it becomes difficult to escape. That's why this principle is about survival. As much as influence, because weakness attracts predators. People exploit what looks desperate. They test boundaries when they sense insecurity. But when you look composed, people hesitate, they think twice. They become more careful. This is especially true in competitive environments. The person who looks like they belong is often treated like they belong, even before they prove anything. That's the power of perception. So how do you build it? Start with 3 things. First, appearance. Not luxury, precision. Wear clothes that fit well. Keep them clean, make your look intentional. It should appear that every detail was chosen, even if it was simple. Simplicity with discipline always beats expensive chaos. Second, body language. Stand tall, keep your shoulders open. Move with purpose. Avoid frantic gestures. Don't let your hands betray nervousness. Stillness is one of the strongest signals of confidence. People unconsciously associate stillness with control. Third, speech. Poor energy talks too much. Rich energy speaks with weight. Pause before responding. Let silence exist, a deliberate sentence carries more authority than a rushed paragraph. This changes how people read you. Suddenly, they assume you think deeply. They assume you are used to being heard. They assume your time has value. And value attracts respect. But now let's move to the advanced layer. The level most people never reach: absence. Poor people are always available. Always replying instantly. Always seeking attention, always present. But powerful people understand the value of scarcity. Scarcity creates demand. When you are always available, people begin to take you for granted. When your presence becomes selective, it becomes valuable. Think about diamonds. They are valuable because they are rare. Water is essential, yet often ignored because it is everywhere. The same principle applies to human perception. If you are constantly present, your presence loses impact. But if you know when to disappear, people begin to feel your absence. And absence increases value. Sometimes, the most powerful move is leaving the room first. Not because you are arrogant, because you understand timing. Arrive with presence. Leave before your image fades. This keeps your value high in people's minds. They continue thinking about you after you're gone. That is real influence. Now here's the deeper truth. This principle doesn't only change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. When you carry yourself like someone powerful, your mind begins adapting to that identity. Your thoughts sharpen. Your standards rise. Your behavior aligns. Over time, the performance becomes reality. What begins as intentional presence becomes genuine confidence. That's the transformation. Perception shapes psychology. Psychology shapes action. Action shapes reality. This is how illusion becomes truth. The world treats you differently. And because it treats you differently, your life changes. More doors open, more people listen. More opportunities appear. Sometimes, simply because people believe you are capable of more. That belief alone can create access to real power. So the question is not, what do I currently have? The real question is, what does my presence communicate? Because your presence is telling a story every second. A story of control or a story of weakness. A story of discipline or a story of neglect. Choose carefully, because people will believe the story you show them. And once enough people believe it, that story begins to shape your reality. That is the hidden law. Never look poor, not because money defines worth, but because perception defines opportunity. And opportunity is where power begins. Here's the secret most people never admit. The world does not reward truth. It rewards performance that may sound harsh. But once you understand it, everything begins to make sense. People are not responding to your inner struggle. They are responding to what your presence makes them feel. Strength, weakness, control, desperation. That is why this principle goes far beyond money. Looking poor is not just about clothes. It is about the story your entire presence tells. Poverty has an energy. It feels rushed. Needy. Loud. Restless. Always chasing, always explaining. Always trying to prove something. But power feels different. Power is calm. Power is still. Power does not chase. It attracts. This is the trap many people fall into. They believe showing struggle will invite respect. They think if they reveal how hard life has been, others will finally understand them. Maybe they'll get sympathy. Maybe they'll get compassion. But here's the brutal truth. Pity is not respect. People may feel sorry for you, but they rarely follow someone they pity. They rarely trust someone who looks like they need saving. This is why powerful people protect their image so carefully. Not because they are fake, because they understand human psychology. People trust stability. They trust control. They trust calmness. And trust opens doors. Imagine two people walking into the same bank. One looks exhausted, nervous, and unsure. The other walks in calm, sharp, and composed. Same building. Same staff. Same situation, yet they are treated differently. Why? Because the story was already told. Before the first word. This is why appearance is strategy. Not vanity, not ego. Survival. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this deeply. Power is built on symbols. And symbols often matter more than truth itself. Now let's go deeper into tactics. First, master silence. Weak people fill every pause. They talk too much because they think words will save them. But silence creates weight. When you pause before speaking, people listen harder when you speak less. Every sentence feels more deliberate. Mystery creates status. Noise destroys its second. Master your exits. This is something most people completely ignore. Poor energy stays too long. It lingers. It seeks validation. It wants to be noticed. But power understands timing. Know when to leave. Leave while your presence is still strong. Leave people wanting more. That hunger increases your value. The room should remember you after you're gone. That is presence. Third, master standards. Weak people accept everything. Every offer, every insult. Every poor treatment they tolerate what lowers them. But powerful people have standards. They quietly refuse what does not serve them. They say no without apology. They walk away without drama. And that restraint commands respect. Because boundaries always signal self-worth. Now let's talk about something even deeper: environment. Poverty is contagious, not only financially, mentally, energetically. If you constantly surround yourself with people who move with desperation, eventually you begin to mirror that energy. People who complain. People who have no standards. People who chase attention. People who have surrendered discipline. That environment slowly shapes your presence. This is why you must choose spaces carefully. Go where ambition exists. Go where discipline is normal. Go where control is valued. Because the energy around you eventually becomes the energy within you. And once that happens, your presence changes naturally. Now here's the deeper psychological truth. The way you carry yourself doesn't just change how the world sees you. If you dress with intention, move with calmness, and speak with control, your own mind starts believing that identity. You begin thinking differently, acting differently, expecting more from yourself. This is where illusion becomes transformation. At first, it may feel like a performance. But over time, the performance rewires identity. And identity shapes destiny. That is the hidden power behind perception. History proves this again and again. Napoleon Bonaparte was not born into great wealth. But from early on, he carried himself like a man meant for command. The world responded to that presence. People began treating him as more than he was. And eventually, that treatment created access to real power. The image came first, the reality followed. That is the lesson. People often become what they consistently project. Now let's move into the final advanced level. Unpredictability. Looking powerful is strong. Looking untouchable is stronger. When people can easily predict you, they become comfortable. Comfort reduces status. But unpredictability creates distance. And distance creates respect. Sometimes show up with complete control. Sometimes disappear. Sometimes become unavailable. Let your absence speak. Scarcity multiplies value. People always chase what feels rare. Think about it. Diamonds are valuable because they are scarce. If they were everywhere, nobody would care. The same principle applies to people. If you are always available, always replying instantly, always accessible, people begin to take your presence for granted. But when your presence becomes selective, it gains weight. Suddenly, people start wondering, where did he go? What is he doing? Why is he different? That curiosity itself becomes influence. This is how you move from looking merely well put together to looking truly untouchable. And untouchability is a form of wealth. Because in a world obsessed with control, the person who cannot be easily read often becomes the most respected. So let's bring everything together. Looking poor kills opportunity. Looking powerful creates opportunity. Looking untouchable creates influence. And here's the truth. None of this requires money. It costs nothing to stand tall. It costs nothing to speak calmly. It costs nothing to dress with intention. It costs nothing to move with control. These things are free, yet their value is enormous. Because people do not know your bank account. They do not know your struggles. They only know the signals you send. If you send weakness, they treat you as weak. If you send control, they treat you as powerful. If you send mystery, they never forget you. That is the game, and once you control perception, you begin controlling outcomes. That is the real Machiavellian truth. Niccolo Machiavelli would remind you that reputation builds opportunity, and opportunity builds power. So here's the final challenge tomorrow. When you step outside, do not just dress differently. Carry yourself differently. Walk slower. Speak less, hold your head higher. Project calm, project control. Project strength, even if your pockets are empty. Let your presence communicate abundance of discipline, confidence, and self-possession. Then watch how the world responds. Watch how people listen more carefully. Watch how strangers treat you differently. Watch how respect appears before achievement. That is not luck, that is perception in action. Because in the end, power is not always about what you have. It is about what people believe you have. And once you control that belief, you control the game.